My name is R. Michael Anderson, president of the Conscious Capitalism San Diego branch. And we're here with Francesco Barbera and Structuring Your Conscious Enterprise. And we call this Conscious Content Friday Live because as a fun thing to do, we have been sending out conscious content notices that are email based, and we thought, why not continue that with our new webinars? And this is a live way to get some of that information. And this is an extension of that. And so it's really my pleasure to introduce Francesco. And let me tell you a little bit about his background. He's a Harvard Law School graduate, so we bring in only the very best here at Conscious Capitalism San Diego. And you know, when we talk about attorneys, because he was actually at our launch event, and the people that met him, because he's one of our corporate partners in Conscious Capitalism San Diego. And what a corporate partner means is we hand select different organizations, or for example, firms like Francesco's that can add value, that we can add value to them in the fact of making this partnership, as well as they can add value to us and our members. And we all think of it as attorneys and the law. Sometimes we think about all the negativity that goes along with them. But what's really interesting is to bring this consciousness and this positivity into the legal arena, because as a lot of us know that this consciousness can be brought everywhere. And that's why Francesco is so unique and why he matches so well with our chapter, that a lot of people that had met him during our launch event said, hey, it's great to meet a conscious attorney, and that's actually turned into some really good relationships. So like I mentioned, he has a Harvard Law School degree. His firm is based here in Southern California. He's based in LA, but he does work all through Southern California. And he's been through a very unique master's degree in spiritual psychology, which of course I know well because I went through the same program. We were actually classmates. It's the University of Santa Monica. It's a master's in spiritual psychology, and so we're really excited that he can bring those two great pillars, that the legal side as well as the consciousness side, here to add value to you. So Francesco, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Awesome.
One of the things that's so cool about conscious capitalism for me, the bringing of my corporate law background into this work is, you know, the work of creating businesses and building businesses is you know, it's such creative work requiring just so much personal investment, personal expression, and you know, when I started working when I left my corporate law practice and started working with entrepreneurs, I began to really see how this vehicle of business and entrepreneurship and company building is just a tremendous vehicle for bringing about change and making a difference and bringing value. And I love that about the work of conscious capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about, you know, consciousness, you know, Francesco came to me and he said, hey, I really want to add value to your members. And so we thought, well, what's the best way to add value to the members? And he said, well, I get as a conscious attorney, a conscious law practice, he said he gets 2 questions asked all the time. And he said, because I get all these questions, why don't we give value and have these in a webinar format? And the first one is how to structure your conscious enterprise today. That's the one we're going to be going through today. And then next Friday, we're going to be doing another one, and that's about conscious investing, right, Francesco, raising conscious money and what that means. Is it both an investor and an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, you know, capital raising capital, how to bring in investors or otherwise attract the growth capital you need to, you know, to get your business running.
Great.
Also hugely significant, yeah.
Great. Okay, so today, structuring your conscious enterprise, because there's so many different options out there, and it's so important that you know how you're going to structure your enterprise. So whether you have an existing enterprise and you want to know what options are available, because even though you're in an existing conscious enterprise, you can still make changes. If you have something new, or maybe you're just at some point want to get into this realm, all this is going to be relevant to you. And again, like I mentioned, for the people that just joined, anytime you have a question, we want as many questions as we can. So on your go-to webinar, there's a little button called questions, and you can type in your questions and we'll answer it live. So every couple minutes I'll be checking for questions and I'll bring them up to Francesco. So going into the agenda, we already started on the intro, but we're just going to give everybody a little bit more background and context on the agenda, or on the introduction. Then we're going to review and discuss the different types of legal structures. And again, maybe they're not all relevant to you, but it's good for you to have some context of the different ones available. And there's ones that are actually very new, and it's very interesting to know what the advantages and disadvantages of them, and then how to choose the right structure. What are the different decision points that need to be made? And then if there's any remaining questions and answers, we'll handle them at that time. So Francesco, do you want to jump into the overview?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I mean, I wanted to start with just some remarks on who this webinar is for. One thing I wanted to clarify at the onset is that it is not for a particular kind of business, like a do-gooder type of business, or businesses that are doing things that are explicitly oriented towards organic foods or the environment or things like that. That's I think a really distinctive point about conscious capitalism, which is that every business, in order to be profitable, has to be bringing value to somebody, and there is an opportunity in every type of business and every type of venture, really, whether it's for-profit or non-profit, to operate at higher and higher levels of consciousness, to access higher purpose, and bring forward a stronger stakeholder orientation, and so forth. And so, I want to make clear that this conversation really applies to, regardless, it applies to really any type of organization. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to, what I try to do as a lawyer, when a founder comes to me or a founding team comes to me and they have a vision, is we're just trying to choose the legal vehicle that is best suited to them accomplishing what it is that they want to accomplish. Now, in the impact arena, what's distinctive about how entrepreneurship is evolving, especially over the past 2 or 3 decades, is entrepreneurs these days are more and more concerned with doing business in a way and creating businesses that generate not just a sustainable business model, revenues and profits, but also positive impact along other metrics, social metrics, environmental metrics, and so forth. And in response, I think, to a whole bunch of critiques of the way business has been done in the past, and I think this emergence of a new level of consciousness among entrepreneurs, we have seen advancements in the types of legal structures that are available. So we have new corporate forms now, like benefit corporations and social corporations, and then we have innovative combinations of traditional corporate forms, like innovative relationships between nonprofit corporations and for-profit corporations, that are all emerging in response to these really creative entrepreneurs that are really pushing the envelope in terms of the desire to generate positive impact and to do it at scale, and to, in a sense, leverage free enterprise and leverage business models to affect more good and impact more people.
Absolutely. So it's like the legal system is catching up with what we've been doing, right? Because there's been so many companies wanting to do this, and now the legal system, the legal structures are saying, okay, we have to create new structures to support what's going on in the marketplace.
Yeah, 100%. It's the legal world is lagging for sure. The legal system in general is a pretty conservative thing. So the change has been slow in coming, but the changes that have happened, and particularly with regard to the benefit corporation movement, are really quite significant. They're very significant. I mean, incremental, but in a significant way. changes to our to traditional corporate law in the United States, for sure. And I look forward to kind of diving into that in more depth.
Good, good.
Yeah. So
like you said, this is relevant to everybody, all different types of companies, all different types of business.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and what's going to, I think the next slide is like what's going to drive it for, for those of you on the call that are actually have a business already or are in the early stages of planning one, even if you've already formed one. But really, what is going to drive the decision behind the corporate form that you want to take for your venture is, and I'm not going to go, I think these factors will kind of play into our conversation as we go through the different legal structures out there. But these I think are really the fundamental drivers of the decision for founders and business owners and executive teams, right? It's number one is what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is the vision? What are your personal goals and your personal orientation towards this vision? So is wealth generation a significant part of what you're trying to accomplish, or I don't even know if "or" is the right word, or is that very much an ancillary kind of consideration, and you're much more mission driven. The next factor is kind of the revenue and impact model, and what I mean by that is that some types of activities are just not suited really for-profit ways of doing things. So a for-profit venture is generally providing some sort of value, some service or product, and doing so in a way that generates some margin, some profit margins, and that not all activities are suitable to the for-profit model. There are some types of organizations that really do exist for charitable purposes that don't involve selling things, but involve giving things away. So that's all of that is obviously a significant factor. The next thing is how much money do you need in order to get things rolling and also to scale and grow, and what are the likely sources of that funding? So if you're looking at raising capital using a private investor base versus that's going to suggest one route, obviously the for-profit route. Depending on the types of investors, that whether it's kind of like institutional or friends and family, that's going to influence things. If you're looking to raise capital through traditional nonprofit sources of funding, like grants and donations, that's also going to play a role in the type of structure that you're choosing. And then finally, ownership and control issues are really significant. Each of these structures has different implications in terms of who's exercising the day-to-day control of the company and who can be considered an owner of the venture. Like nonprofits, for example, don't have owners. For-profits are owned by shareholders, and cooperatives are for-profit, but they're owned and controlled by workers or consumer members. And so there's, as we go through the different options that are out there, we'll see how these factors kind of play into the different types of legal structures.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And it seems like this is one of the biggest strategic decisions that a company can make, and it may be, both on what I'm hearing and my experience in business, this can also almost be an afterthought when they're starting the company. When somebody's starting the company, it can have massive implications 1, 5, 10, 20 years down the road.
It can. It can. I mean, there aren't that many decisions that are totally irreversible. But it's certainly these decisions are really fundamental to the character of the enterprise, without a doubt.
Yes.
Yeah, and they will absolutely impact the growth trajectory and the and the culture and many other things about what founders are up to. Yeah.
Good. And I like your bottom line. What legal structure best advances the company's purpose and vision? It really boils down to that. So it's a good signpost. So do you want to just, because we're going to go into these in more detail, all these different, so these are the list of structures, and then we're going to hit these one by one in detail. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll go into a little bit more detail about them, but yeah, this slide is really just intended to provide a sort of broad lay of the land about what entrepreneurs are doing these days. So there are plenty of companies out there, and I think this is a significant point. There are plenty of companies out there that are operating in old school traditional corporate forms like a regular old corporation, and that, by any standard that we would use would be a conscious business, because of the differences that, that the consciousness is sort of not baked into the legal structure, but it is a function of the leadership in the company and the management in the company and the culture that's been created within the company. But now, more recently, we have these kinds of structures have evolved to have a more explicitly impact-oriented focus. And so we'll talk a little bit more about benefit corporations, which is probably the most significant one, and some of these other ones, which are really also interesting and give entrepreneurs and business owners, executive teams, I think, like a really powerful tool, new tool for kind of putting a stake in the ground, creating a particular type of culture, creating a corporate identity and a business identity that is distinctive in the marketplace, that attracts the right people, and so forth. And so that's sort of the next category. Then you have nonprofits, which obviously have been around a while, that have a very significant place in the social enterprise landscape. For the reasons I was suggesting, there's certain types of activities that just that aren't suited to for-profit models, that require, the support of the nonprofit organizational form. And this next category of bringing these two types of companies together is, I think, also a really interesting and exciting area right now, where you have what have been traditional nonprofits beginning to leverage for-profit models to in a way scale up what they're doing. So some recent examples of that are, well, we'll get into what recent examples of that are, but you have like nonprofits kind of spinning off software, for example, into for-profit subs that can then commercialize the software. You have joint ventures between nonprofit publishers and for-profit media companies, and just really interesting things happening in that space. And finally, there's this other these aren't really legal structures, but it's a significant part of the landscape as well, which is there are these organizations out there that are performing really valuable service in providing standards and certifications that enable companies to give their stakeholders visibility into their practices, into their manufacturing practices and their business practices and so forth. And B-Lab is an important one that are doing certified B corporations, but there's a lot of other ones that are certifying manufacturing practices, labor practices, and so forth. And those are also important tools that are available to businesses that want to that want to project a certain type of consciousness and presence in the marketplace.
Good. Yeah, and I think, like you said, they might not be structured, but I think it's important to know about them because they're really important nowadays. We do have a question. I think this is a question that is sort of like, hey, as you're going through these different, this is a question I don't think to answer now, but to make sure that you address these as we talk about them. David asks, what type of business structures for purpose-driven or conscious business are most popular right now? And do you see this changing in the next couple years? Like what's trending And then if you were to create a conscious company right now, what route would you take, assuming you have a clear vision?
Yeah, well, I can't really answer that statistically because I don't know. I don't have access to those kinds of numbers just in terms of the percentage of corporations that are being formed and what structures are being used. So my response is going to be anecdotal based on my involvement in this and in the impact space and working with entrepreneurs and other lawyers, right? And I will say that benefit corporations are the corporate form that are really developing significant traction in this space. And there's a number of reasons for that. Number one, they've been enacted in Delaware and California, and those are, as well as almost 30 other states. So they have a kind of level of sort of the blessing of these really significant corporate law states, and you have some really high-profile companies like Kickstarter and Plum Organics and some other ones that are like venture-backed, that have made and that have organized as Delaware public benefit corporations. We recently had the first Delaware public benefit corporation file for an IPO, and so the majority of entrepreneurs that that are attracted to these alternative structures that I speak with are interested in benefit corporations, and I think there's good reason for that too, because it is, I think, from a legal perspective, it really is kind of putting the sort of putting your money where your mouth is, so to speak. Like when you decide to become a benefit corporation, it is not an insignificant thing. It is saying that we're making a commitment and we're undertaking an obligation to run our company in a responsible and sustainable manner, and to have a stakeholder orientation. So I know that there are probably plenty of cynics out there, but if you read the statutes and the commentary, you'll see that it really is a significant difference from what we have in traditional corporate law. And the reason why it's significant is because it is, you've had other attempts like constituency statutes to integrate some of these concerns, but they've never really had any teeth. But the benefit corporation statute is, as I said, it obligates directors and officers to take into account, the public benefit that's being pursued by the company, and it obligates them to really embrace a stakeholder orientation.
Got it. And how about, because there's some things, well, I'll tell you, I'll ask as we go through, because I want to keep you on track here, because there's a couple that I've heard of and a couple I hadn't, so,
okay.
So
yeah.
we'll just jump in. So,
I think, and was it David that asked that question?
Yes.
Yeah, what I would choose, and I, for the reasons that I just described, I would choose a benefit corporation. I just think they're really exciting and inspiring, and when they're in the hands of a founder and a founding team, like the Kickstarter founding team is, I just think, such a great example of it, that believes in the mission behind a company and is willing to put sort of the legal, willing to back that with in legal terms. It can be just tremendously powerful from cultural point of view, from the point of view of what you're projecting to your community. Yeah, and I just think it's a great tool for mission-driven founders.
Got it.
Yeah.
Should we move on and start digging in?
Yeah, absolutely.
The other question I got is about my taskbar showing. That's part of it. So sometimes when I click on to check the questions, you may see my taskbar, but just ignore that. We got so much other good stuff on the slide, so I do know that's happening, but no worries. We're all flowing here. So so let's dig more into the traditional corporate forms.
Yeah, so Well, you know, all I want to say about traditional corporate forms is that there's absolutely nothing, there's nothing wrong with, there's nothing about, um, uh, there's nothing wrong with not choosing one of these new structures and choosing to operate your company through a traditional vehicle. That's really what I want to say here. And there are myriad examples of great companies that are, they're public companies or private companies. All the firms of endearment that are profiled by Raj Sisodia in that book, they all became those companies within that old, you know, the traditional corporate paradigm. So I've highlighted some: Southwest, Costco, Nordstrom's, all of these companies that have, you know, that are known for their distinctive cultures, for treating their employees well. They're all operating within the traditional corporate law framework. You know, and so the benefits of doing this are, right, these are known quantities. They've been in the market for a while. They're familiar to all investors. There's a lot of legal precedent to provide guidance to management on how to operate and make decisions and so forth. And you know, that there are, I would say, you know, turning to the disadvantages, right? So there, you know, the benefit corporations, right, and social purpose corporations arose in response, I think, to this widespread feeling and perception, and, you know, to some degree reality, that the traditional corporate law framework was just incentivizing an exclusive focus on shareholders and shareholder profit maximization, and disincentivizing the stakeholder orientation. And you know, I think that to some degree there is truth and there is merit to that. And so when you're operating in a corporate in a traditional corporate entity, fiduciary duties generally do flow to you know, exercising care and loyalty to the company and to the shareholders. There's a lot of debate about, you know, is it really true that directors can't consider other factors, and so forth, and you know, the truth is that directors' offices, because of they do have a huge amount of latitude in how they choose to operate companies, and so it's for that reason, you know, that when companies have really conscious management, you know, they have the room to do what's being done in Whole Foods, giving it, you know, 5 or more % of profits to charity. They have, and even more than that, you know, and they can choose to pay above market salaries and do all things if it's in their judgment that is really in the best interest of the company in the long term. So there is latitude, but the difference is that, and the advance that's represented by benefit corps and social purpose corps, is that in those alternate forms, it's mandated. You know, it's part of the legal compact of the company, whereas in traditional forms, the impact and purpose-driven objectives of the company they're in the hands of management. You know, it depends entirely on management, and so, you know, in the kind of like the takeover or M&A context, for example, in the sale of the company context, the impact and purpose does become vulnerable to being, you know, subsumed and overridden, so to speak, by, you know, by other considerations. You know, and those are, you know, and so those are important things to consider.
Okay. Well, let's dig into benefit corps, and then we can get more a contrast to how what benefits they bring to the traditional ones.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So in this slide, I tried to give a brief overview of, I mean, list out basically what I think are the principal for-profit alternatives to a traditional corporation or traditional LLC. Benefit corporations are the most significant one. Social purpose corporations are pretty much only in California and Washington, I think, right now. And so I think for that reason, they're used, but not as well known yet. Cooperatives have been around for a really long time, and they're very cool and really interesting ways to organize things. But because of their particular characteristics, that is, they're very democratic in how they work. So they're not suitable to a lot of situations, especially founder-driven companies, or companies that are, created by small teams of founders that, really where ownership, control, and particularized vision is kind of key. And low-profit LLCs are created as mission-driven kind of LLCs, and they were originated as vehicles to receive grant funding from large foundations that, could make what we're to call program-related equity or loan investments in for-profit companies. But again, California, Delaware don't have authorizing. I believe Delaware doesn't either have authorizing statutes for low-profit LLCs, and so they're not a big, they're not a significant part of my practice, but they are available to certain types of mission-driven companies, in particular those, that are looking to nonprofit sources of capital, like foundations.
Right.
So,
yeah. Just so I make sure. So traditional forms of impact overlay. So this is so. Can you quickly just tell us what a benefit corporation is, and what a social purpose and what a cooperative is? Because you talked a little bit about the differences, but like a benefit corporation is what exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why these are traditional forms with impact overlay, because all of them are, like a benefit corporation is just a regular corporation. It's taxed the same as a regular for-profit corporation. So it could be a
it could be an LLC, LLC, S Corp, C Corp, right?
Well, a benefit corporation is not an LLC, it's a corporation, but it can be a C corporation or an S corporation, which is basically just a different way of taxing corporations. So in virtually all respects, it is operated as a regular corporation, but it has certain distinctive qualities that relate to these features that we're talking about, and the impact-related features, and we'll talk about those in more depth in the next slide. Social purpose corporations, same thing. They're regular corporations that whose purpose as a corporation is, in a sense, expanded to include the pursuit of these social bottom lines, impact bottom lines. Cooperatives, same thing. They could be for-profit, they could be non-profit. The distinction is in how they are governed, the corporate governance, and how voting control of cooperatives works are the distinctive features. I have very little experience in cooperatives, but my colleague Jenny Casson, who's of counsel with my firm, is one of the top co-op lawyers in the country, and again, I just think that these are companies like REI, Equal Exchange are co-ops, and so you could see from those types of companies that co-ops can really create very positive, distinctive cultures.
Is there a test where you may want to be a cooperative? Is there a specific industry or size, or does it fit in the vision, or is it more just that you want to be like a democratically run organization?
Yeah, I mean, when you're what it requires is a pretty tightly knit community, really, around the venture. So if you think of worker co-ops are organizations where the workers actually own the enterprise and work in the enterprise. So, that's obviously a really distinctive situation, but it's well suited for well, it's really well suited for a particular type of person, particular types of people who are excited about that idea of of that shared ownership model and everyone being in it together type of thing. And REI, which is a consumer co-op, and and I love REI because you go in there and you do feel like you're part of the REI community, and we get our dividend back at the end of the year because we as the consumers and members of REI are part owners of it, and so yeah, they're pretty cool tools, but again, very, very distinctive.
Okay, and out of all of these, I think it's important to note that benefit corporations is the main one. The main one now, the main one you see that's going to be popular in the future.
I think so. Especially because we have some high-profile companies sort of leading the charge. We now have an IPO that's on its way and hopefully will happen, and so all of that is very significant for entrepreneurs that are looking to raise funding from from investors and scale up an enterprise. Those are significant developments.
Okay. Are you ready for the next slide?
Yes, I am. Okay, so yeah, this is going into a little bit more depth into what does it actually mean to be a benefit corporation? What are the effects of it? And I've kind of Delaware and California have pretty different statutes, but they're similar at a certain level of abstraction. And so I've kind of tried to combine them here. And for example, like technology entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs that are likely to be seeking institutional or professional investment, I will generally steer them in the Delaware route so that they get, only because it's you get the benefit of general Delaware corporate law, which is kind of like our national corporate law state, basically. So what's distinctive about both California and Delaware benefit corporations, and really all benefit corporations, is that they have this mandate of creating, of being operated in a way that creates public benefit. That means that that as part of the legal charter of the corporation, the directors and officers of this company have an obligation to operate the company in a way that produces public benefit. Obviously, that's like general language and pretty broad language. In Delaware, the language is that directors and officers are obligated to operate the company in a responsible and sustainable manner. And in addition to that sort of general mandate, founders and shareholders have the opportunity to specify what more particularized mission, the more particularized public benefits that they're creating this company in order to bring forward and pursue. So so really on this corporate purposes category, there's two levels. There's one, you have to operate it in a way that is responsible, in a way that is good for the world, so to speak, to use some very general language. And then at a more specific level, you can designate what are the specific things, what are the specific positive outcomes that this company is going to bring forward. Whether it's greater health or education or technological developments or environmental, enhancements, whatever it is for the founder. And then once you do that, once you spell that out, then that mission really becomes a part of the legal charter of the company, and it becomes a part of what the directors become obligated and officers become obligated to consider as they go about operating the company.
So it's really like putting a flag in the sand to say, look, this is, like companies like Whole Foods do it because they want to. This is like saying, look, this is what I'm definitely going to do, and then the whole organization is behind it.
That's right. Yeah. It's a big deal for that reason.
Yeah. I see that.
Yeah, and then sometimes people say, well, what are the benefits of becoming? I get the question of like, well, why do people do this? What are the benefits of it? And sometimes my response is, well, it's really not about the benefits. It's kind of the opposite. You're holding yourself up to a higher standard, really. And saying, no, we're not going to do things the way they're typically done. We're going to be more thoughtful and considerate in how we go about things. Now, I happen to think there are tremendous benefits to doing that, in terms of, and that's what conscious capitalism is all about. Doing things this way works. It works.
Yeah, intrinsic type. It's not, you don't get tax benefits, you don't get regulation benefits. It's more intrinsic. It's about more having that soul, more being all into this, right?
Well, that's part of it, but I mean, but that translates into performance. I mean, I think that translates into more motivated, engaged employees, a more loyal customer and user base, lower marketing expense. All the things that Professor Sisodia found in firms of endearment and people are waking up to is like, this is not do-good or nonsense. It's good business, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that, yeah. So.
Anything else you want to cover on benefit corps?
Well, I don't know, Mike. I mean, there are these other features to it under the accountability and transparency that are maybe a little bit more technical. I'll leave it up to you. Should we cover these, kind of quickly?
I think if you can cover them quickly. We have about 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get everything in. And
yeah,
if it's too
sure.
technical, I think people can reach out to you. And again, everybody, at the end of the webinar, we'll be giving you Francesco's information. So if there's more detail you want on something, he's a very open, giving guy. I'm sure you can drop him a line. He can fill in more details.
Yeah, absolutely, no question. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody that's on this call or in the conscious capitalism community. So I'm looking at.
Well, I was just going to ask, have you helped an organization move to a benefit corporation from a traditional one, and what that process was like?
Yes, yeah, I have done these conversions, and from a legal point of view, it's fairly straightforward. It's really just you have to amend your charter to state that you're a benefit corporation. You have to spell out your specific public benefits if that's what you choose to do. The thing that's tricky about it is that if you have shareholders, you pretty much have to you need a 2/3 vote. So you need a supermajority approval in order to do the conversion.
Okay.
So it's obviously it's a lot easier to do it in earlier stage companies where they're generally founder controlled. But it can be done later on. Kickstarter just did it, and they have a whole bunch of venture capital investors, and so subject to that voting requirement, it's a pretty straightforward process.
Okay, so we have a question here. I'm looking at it. Let me just see if I can make it a little bit. Okay, Babak says they're going to follow up with you because it's a bit technical. They're going through their scenario. So yeah, Babak, why don't you follow up with Francesco, because that's going to be a hard one to easily translate into this quick discussion here, just because they're giving all the different they're giving all the different things. But we're great you're asking the questions, and we're great you're being able to think about it here and able to reach out to him. So again, if you do whatever you have on your mind, just shoot it there, and we'll tell you if we can handle it now or we can handle it later. So are we on to the next slide?
Yeah, well, let me just address those notes down below. I think the accountability and transparency stuff is that's probably a little too much detail given how much time left. But I'm happy to talk more about that with anybody that wants to reach out. The notes below. I do want to talk briefly about certified B corporations and the term B corporation, which is out there a lot, and I think is used it's used to reference. I mean, it's a little bit of an ambiguous term out there right now. Some people, when they say B Corps, are referring to certified B corporations. Others are referring to benefit corporations. And I think it's a little bit, the terminology is a bit confused. But a certified B corporation isn't necessarily a benefit corporation, but it's a corporation that's been through a certification process run by B Lab, passed a test, so to speak, and has provided verification to B Lab that they're doing things in a certain way. And the test is pretty rigorous, and it measures environmental sustainability practices, hiring practices, and governance practices, and so forth. And I think that community, they've just done an amazing job, I think, leading the benefit corporation movement, and I think creating a community of entrepreneurs around certified B Corps that, and I think it's wonderful, and it's a great community to be a part of.
Yeah, I think that's great to really drill into people, because as I understand it, there's benefit corporations, which is a legal designation. There's B Corps, which is a third-party designation by B Labs. To be a B Corp, they actually make you become a benefit corporation. But you can be a benefit corporation without being a B Corp.
Well, that is in states that where you can be a benefit corporation, you generally need to be a benefit corporation. I think unless you're an LLC, in which case you can have an operating agreement that accomplishes similar things. Basically, it's a state by whether you need to be a benefit corporation is state by state. But in California, if you're operating as a corporation, you basically need to convert into a benefit corporation within a certain amount of time.
Gotcha. So there's another question by Malcolm, because we talked about how a B Corp needs to be tested by B Labs. For a benefit corporation, a legal entity, is there a test that regulators use? Is there minimum standards to retain it? Are there metrics? What are how does the government know that you're in compliance?
Well, that's an awesome question, and the government's, the statutory position on that is, well, we as a government are not going to get in the business of making those assessments, but here's what we're going to put in place to make sure people aren't fudging. Number one, we're going to require benefit corporations to publicly disclose in an annual benefit report to shareholders and to the general public what the company is doing in the way of advancing general public benefit, pursuing the specific public benefits. So with a benefit corporation, you as the management team needs to self-evaluate themselves, needs to do like a self-audit. In California, you have to use a third-party standard. So you have to test yourself against an independent third-party set of metrics. And B Lab is one of those, probably the most common one. But there are other third-party organizations that provide a set of guidelines or metrics against which you can evaluate your environmental practices, your governance practices, and so forth. And so if you form yourself as a benefit corporation, you have to choose one of these third-party standards and then annually measure yourself against that standard and disclose to shareholders and to the public how you're doing and what you're doing, as it relates to the benefit that you're pursuing. Now, the other accountability can be exercised by shareholders of the company. And this is an area where benefit corps are still pretty conservative, in the sense that they're putting most power in the hands of shareholders. Shareholders can bring proceedings against the company. In California, they're called benefit enforcement proceedings that basically say, hey, you're not doing what you said you were going to do. And they're not proceedings for money damages, but you can have your attorney's fees reimbursed, and sometimes that can be significant. I'm not aware of any proceeding that's been brought yet under these statutes, but it will be interesting. It'll be an interesting area of litigation when it does arise, and I'm sure it will.
Gotcha. Okay, and just to give you a heads up, we got about 8 minutes left, and I think we got some more content. So.
Okay, cool.
Do we have? Oh, what did I do here? So this is the next slide, right? And push too many buttons here. All right, so here's where we're at. Right?
Hybrid, for-profit, non-profit. Yeah. Yeah, this is. I wanted to highlight this in particular because. Because a lot of clients that I speak with do have, in a sense, hybrid visions for what they're doing. That is, there's both a for-profit and a non-profit component to their vision. As an example, a client of mine is a manufacturer in the kind of soap products and hygiene space, like disinfectants and soaps and things like that. And there's a for-profit component to that in the United States, and then a non-profit component in developing countries, where he's training, training people in those countries to become independent distributors of these products. And so he's kind of like creating, it's almost like a business incubator for people to become distributors of these hygiene products. And it's a really nice model of advancing hygiene and health in a way that also provides jobs and economic empowerment. So very cool model. But there's the developing country work is financed by donations, and it's also financed by the profits of the for-profit activity, right? So
this is exciting, very, very interesting, creative. There's a lot of possibilities that can come out of this.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. Another example is a nonprofit that I work with. In the course of their charitable activities, they developed some assessment software that they were using with their constituency that they then realized had a lot of commercial potential if they could bring in investors and bring in engineers and so forth. And so we spun that software asset off into a partly owned subsidiary. And the idea is that they're now going to commercialize it by bringing in professional investors, and they can create incentive compensation plans for engineers and so forth. So that's kind of like a nonprofit with the for-profit subsidiary. And that you see, and those subsidiaries can be wholly or partly owned by the nonprofit, right? LA Kitchen is another. They're not a client, but they're an amazing organization here in LA that their nonprofit does they collect food that would otherwise go to waste, like for example fruit that is aesthetically damaged and can't be sold in traditional supermarkets for that reason. They collect all of that fruit and then give it out, create healthy meals and give it to needy people as a nonprofit. And then their wholly owned for-profit sub is a company called Strong Foods that actually generates is a catering business in a sense and generates profits that feed back into LA Kitchen. So that's another example.
If it's wholly owned, what's the benefit of creating a subsidiary company, a different entity?
Well, it's because as a nonprofit, to maintain your nonprofit status, you need to be doing charitable activities. Like you can't have tax exempt an organization that's exempt from income taxes that's running a for-profit business, and so there's a threat of losing your nonprofit status if you're generating income from business activity. So you have to spin it off.
Yeah, so this is fourth sector type of stuff. This is a way for companies to achieve that fourth sector where they're not a nonprofit, not a for-profit. They're for societal good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
Then you have, okay, so these other types are, so nonprofits with mission-related income, that's related to what you just said. Sometimes, nonprofits can raise a certain amount of money from for-profit activities as long as it doesn't overwhelm their charitable kind of function, Yeah. So a typical example of that is a bookstore in a museum. A museum is there to educate. The bookstore is there to earn profits that funds the nonprofit mission. And then let's see. Then so for for-profits, then there's nonprofit for-profit joint ventures, which is also, I think, really interesting. Where the software one that I talked about is, in a sense, you could call that a joint venture. A pretty high-profile one in the news recently was National Geographic partnering with 20th Century Fox and creating National Geographic Partners. So 20th Century Fox brings capital and distribution. National Geographic brings all of this extraordinary content related to nature, and their charitable mission, relates to educating people and inspiring people around nature. And so they go into this joint venture with 20th Century Fox, and the partnership enables them to advance their charitable mission at a much greater scale.
And the joint venture is for profit.
It is, yeah.
Got it. That's interesting. And then Whole Planet Foundation, obviously, that sounds like the nonprofit that has to do with Whole Foods, and it gives them a way to further their mission through a nonprofit. But that's probably made up because nobody owns that nonprofit. They just probably have their own board that are fully aligned, and that's how they keep making sure that it has the mission, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, there are different, private foundations are different from, typical public charities because they typically rely on a single donor, and so the Whole Foods, and so for that reason, they can actually be affiliated in some way, but there are obviously, there are obviously strong governance requirements, and private foundations are heavily regulated. But there are again a lot of companies that and a lot of founders that have this idea of using profits generated from the business to accumulate a pool of capital that they can then use to fund all manner of kind of other charitable activities. Now, Mark Zuckerberg just did it in a huge, high-profile way, and he used an LLC, which was really interesting. Well, we could talk about that, but it's sort of getting a little bit far afield. So you don't have to use a foundation. But I mean, it's what he did, what Mark Zuckerberg and his wife did with using an LLC is so indicative, I think, of these trends that we're seeing, where conscious where it's being seen and acknowledged that private enterprise really can be a vehicle for solving some of these really big problems.
That's amazing. What was $50 billion or something estimated?
Yeah, $50 billion, yeah.
So if people didn't hear, and we gotta wrap up right after this. Mark Zuckerberg, I think Zuckerberg just yesterday, he's the founder of Facebook, said that he's going to donate 99% of his stock over the next 10 or 20 years to charitable resources, to charitable causes. And so that was pretty amazing. So we're right at the top of the hour, so we want to make sure we stay as much on time as we can. So Francesco, we just really want to thank you. And here's his contact info. And we talked about this before. He's been very generous. He's been very generous to members of our Conscious Capitalism San Diego. So if you do have questions, I think Babak had a question, detailed question. If you have anything, feel free to reach out to him. Email is probably a great way so we can get some of the context. I also wanted to put his mission up there because I think his mission to me is very inspiring. Because again, to have an attorney in the legal field really as a benefit corporation and as a conscious capitalist, spiritual psychologist, higher purpose and Kai, all those good things, what a real blessing he can bring to you and your organization. He's been a great friend of mine for a lot of years now, and so I can vouch for him personally as well as professionally. I'm a client of his as well. So, Francesco, any closing words here as we finish up?
Well, I just think that was very kind, Michael. I really appreciate it. I do welcome and invite anyone to reach out to me personally as a fellow member of this community. More than happy to spend some time talking with you. I also want to compliment Michael and his team at Conscious Capitalism San Diego for doing just such an incredible job building a community and a chapter that I think is just one of the finest conscious capitalism chapters out there. And you've done it in a really short time, and very proud to be working with you.
Well, thanks. We're proud of everybody. Happy to be working with you. Thanks for those kind words. And just so everybody knows, next Friday, same time, 11 a.m. PST, we're going to have another one. Francesca's going to be back talking about conscious capital, conscious capital. Whether you're an investor or looking for that conscious capital, we're going to be talking about different things that can help you around those areas. If you have any questions, send him a question in advance, send me a question in advance. If there's something that you want to hear on that particular program, let us know so that we can tailor the content to you. And if you and as a heads up, we got a great Q1 coming for you in Conscious Capitalism San Diego. Looks like in January we're going to run a Conscious Capitalism assessment. So for your business, you can come in and assess your business. Working on a surprise guest speaker for February, and Raj Sisodia, one of the co-authors of Conscious Capitalism, that's committed to March 21st in the evening. We're going to get more details about that event. So thanks, everybody. Have a great Conscious Friday and a Conscious weekend, and we will see you next Friday at 11 a.m. See you later, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Francesco. Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.